Yeah, so thank you, Pepe, for setting this up. And as you mentioned, I do want to make sure to leave some time for questions. And I'm really excited to come to Mexico City next week on Thursday and speak at ETOM. And today I wanted to, I mean, we chatted about talking about a little bit of a different topic than what I'll be talking about next week, Thursday. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what law schools are doing and how the legal landscape is evolving. I mean, there's lots to talk about in this space, but I just put together kind of a short deck of slides talking a little bit about what's changing in the marketplace and then some of the stuff that we're doing here at Northwestern. And so I don't think it'll actually take me very long to go through the slides. And so I'd really encourage folks to be prepared to ask some questions about some of the things that I talk about. Just a little bit about my background. Before I went to law school, I worked in information technology. I did some work designing websites, data-driven websites, using active server pages, things like that. And then I started working for a couple of different groups of companies building enterprise information. So building relational databases in SQL Server, building front ends in Microsoft Access and in Visual Basic, doing things like that. And I also got a master's degree in public policy and administration at the same time. So I had a lot of training in econometrics and thinking about how to use data to improve policy, to improve implementation and evaluation of programs, things like that. And frankly, the whole time I was doing this, I was a little bit, I mean, I really enjoyed what I was doing, but I was a little bit worried that I was wasting my time because I knew I wanted to go to law school and I didn't think that I was going to be doing a lot of this in law school or when I was in practice. So I left that. I went to law school at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I then clerked for a federal court of appeals, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's just below the US Supreme Court. That was a great experience. And then I went to Honigman. And I mostly did automotive supply chain litigation while I was at Honigman. I also did some work representing video game developers and some of these emerging issues and emerging media as well. I was an equity partner at Honigman. I had started to teach as an adjunct at the University of Michigan Law School and at Michigan State Law School. And then I had the opportunity to join Michigan State full time, which I did about 5 years ago. So I was there. I launched Legal R&D, Legal Service Innovation. A couple of years ago became affiliated faculty at Stanford Codex, the Stanford Center for Legal Informatics. And last year I joined Northwestern. I was here as a visitor last year, and now I'm here full time with a joint appointment in the law school and in the engineering school. So it's a really great opportunity here to build on. Northwestern has been doing some really interesting interdisciplinary education for a while now, and being at a school that has a really strong connection with engineering and with computer science has really opened up a lot of opportunities. So I'm really excited about the stuff that we're doing here, but the potential to do much more. And okay, so why are we doing this? What are the problems that we're trying to solve? And one of the problems is just access to legal services. In the United States, I usually use numbers for the United States, which, very wealthy country, but yet 80% of the impoverished, half of the middle class lack access to legal services. And this is a problem really around the globe. But it's not just individual consumers, it's even businesses. And it's not just small businesses and startups, it's even large businesses say that we're not really getting what we need from our lawyers. They need new skills, they need data, they need technology to better serve us in this data-driven digital era. So many of the consumers that we serve are expecting us to innovate, expecting us to use data, expecting us to use technology. And this is really an opportunity across the globe, just to think about so many people, billions of people, who don't have reliable justice systems and don't have access to social, economic, and political opportunities. And that's something that's right for us in the legal industry to do for everyone, but it's also inures to our benefit, right? And when we talk about rule of law, that's something as lawyers that we're responsible for. And if we can improve legal systems and the delivery of legal services and rule of law around the world, not only is it the right thing to do, but it will create a lot of opportunities for us as lawyers and other legal services professionals. And so one of the things I've been trying to do to frame kind of the challenge a little bit is just really thinking big and thinking when we are going to a world where already the majority of people have access to a smartphone or access to the internet. There's still a little bit of a digital divide in some places for sure, and we have to think about that. But how can we really leverage these opportunities and provide everyone access to law so they know what their rights and their responsibilities are, access to basic legal information, access to legal services, and then really shift our mindset to being more proactive, trying to prevent problems, help making sure people and companies understand their rights and obligations and prevent problems from happening. And then think about these products and platforms and systems that we're designing. Instead of fighting about things and litigating things after the fact, why don't we as lawyers get engaged in the product development process? And why don't we build products and platforms and systems so that they comply with law and they respect human rights, they respect democratic principles, all of that by design and default from the beginning, right? So that we should be setting much bigger goals for ourselves as lawyers and in the legal industry. And so how are we going to get there? Right. So there's a lot of talk about this idea of robot lawyers. And, on the one hand, I think that there's too much hype about this. On the other hand, the technology is very real. And sometimes people are too quick to write it off as well. So we've got to kind of balance and understand, well, what can these technologies do? How can we use data analytics and technology as lawyers? But what are the other skills that we have to develop? What are the other things that we need to do in our legal profession so that we can maximize the opportunities to improve legal services delivery, including by using data and technology? So one of the things that comes up are these questions about, well, can robots be lawyers? And I think it's interesting. So there's been a lot of writing about this and not a lot of in-depth analysis. This is one of the better studies, although it has its challenges. But Dana Remus and Frank Levy looked at lawyers' billing data, and they aggregated 114 unique UTBMS task codes. So this is a uniform task-based management system that the ABA has put out, and I'm sure some of you have seen this, right? And just think about it, tasks for different codes for different tasks that lawyers do. And they analyzed 13 categories of the work that lawyers do. Now, again, this has some problems because the way we as lawyers describe the work that we do, particularly when it ends up in a bill that the client receives, it might not reflect real well the actual work that went into that matter, right? So we might not have the best data to really understand what it is that lawyers do. And also there's some questions about this study, whether it really considered state-of-the-art technology, much less technology that we develop in the future. But setting those things aside, what they came up with is they say, well, a careful look at existing and emerging technologies reveals that it is only relatively structured and repetitive tasks that can currently be automated. And those tasks represent a relatively modest percentage of lawyers' billable hours. And so on one hand, maybe some lawyers will look at this and say, oh gosh, all right, well, thank God these machines aren't going to take away my job. But on the other hand, I think that this should force us to ask some tough questions, right? And say, well, in most other industries, aren't the best service providers always looking for how they can improve what they do and how they can automate different tasks so they can do things that add even greater value for their clients, for their customers, right? And so, why don't we ask, and why is so much legal work unstructured? And based on my experience in practice, and of course, this is a generalization, not all areas of practice are the same, but I think in many areas of practice, even in surprisingly sophisticated areas of practice, we don't have standards, we don't have best practices, we don't have metrics for quality. This is an area I've been doing research, for example. You look at medicine, right? And 100 years ago in medicine, what they mostly had were normative standards. So doctors would say, oh, this is what we do, this is how we do it, that's the right way to do it. But there wasn't any data, right? It wasn't empirical. People didn't look at what was done as the treatment and what was the outcome to really assess, what were the best practices. And that's changed. I mean, medicine has become very much evidence-based. But yet in law, we don't have that same kind of discipline, right? We each get to kind of decide how we're going to handle a transaction or draft a contract. And there's some kind of normative standards, but we really don't measure what is a high quality contract or a legal brief or things like that. We don't measure the things we do and ask, well, how much does that actually contribute to a positive outcome, things like that. And that lack of metrics makes it difficult then to automate things with standard technology and with artificial intelligence, right? If it's chaos, we can't automate what we do not understand. And as an aside, I would say that some of the chaos that we see in the legal services delivery environment and the way that we are frequently managing things, managing crises, is bad for us as lawyers too, for mental health, for diversity, for equal opportunities for everyone who practices, right? So there's a lot of reasons why that we should be thinking about as lawyers to become, to develop standard practices for doing things, become much more data driven. And something I think that captures kind of the way that we practice law, and this is quite a few years old already now, it's almost 7 years old, but Paul Lippi did this story, is practicing law like creating art. And this was kind of just an informal, I'm not suggesting that this is a scientific poll, but I think it captures a lot the sentiment of a lot of lawyers where, yes, practicing law is an art. Anyone who doesn't get that shouldn't be practicing. And I've even had people tell me, well, you can't measure the quality of a contract. You just can't do it. I mean, that's nonsense. That is nonsense. And we need to move forward on figuring out how can we capture data to really understand what is important to our clients and how do we actually get the best outcomes possible for our clients. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And that will really facilitate then using data analytics and using technology in the practice of law. So I'm frequently saying we need to be less like artists and more like scientists, right? Like we need to run experiments and discover new knowledge. And we need to go from being artisans to being engineers, right? There's knowledge out there. How do we acquire that knowledge? It's like building a bridge, right? If an architect or an engineer was asked to build a bridge, they wouldn't do it from scratch. They would go to a basic body of knowledge and say, well, what are the components? What are the building blocks? And there's a lot of legal work that we ought to be able to handle that way with building blocks. And we should be pushing the profession, the industry forward to do more and more of that practice in that way so that we can automate things that are lower level things, basic contracts and basic disputes, so that we as lawyers can contribute to solving much bigger problems in the world, right? True grand challenges in the world that we as lawyers could contribute to helping solve. So when I take a step back, I really think that we focus a little too much on technology and we don't think about these other ways in which the industry is changing. And this is particularly thinking from the perspective of a law school is what I was going to talk about today, but I think this works just as well if you're an individual lawyer, if you're a law firm, if you're a corporate legal department, if you're some other player, a law company, legal process outsourcing company, and so on. Just thinking that this isn't just about technology, but there are changes in the marketplace for people, process, data, technology, right? So I would put it into these 4 categories, just kind of how the legal industry is changing. So when you think about people, thinking about recruiting and retaining different kinds of people, not just lawyers, but allied professionals, software developers, data scientists, project managers. We're seeing more and more law firms hiring project managers. There's been a preference for people who have a law degree. We'll see if that sustains itself or if we have more and more programs like our Master of Science in Law here at Northwestern, where you have a professional who gets 1 year of training in law, whether that person will be a great fit for a project manager. But the point being, there are opportunities to have new types of professionals help deliver value in the legal industry. And then we can also think about new skills for lawyers: leadership, management, listening, coaching, counseling, empathy, right? We hear people talk about these skills, but I think as lawyers, we tend to think, oh, you're either born with them or you don't have them, right? And I think that's a real shame. And we should do more in law schools to teach that, and we should do more to encourage practicing lawyers to work on and develop those skills. You can learn to be a better leader. You can read books about management and leadership and listening and coaching and improve as a lawyer directly to your client, and then also as a team member inside of a law firm, working with your colleagues, with other people who may report to you, and so on. But then also having some of these skills in those other categories: process skills, data skills, technology skills. So what this really comes down to, and some of you may have seen this before, is thinking about the new set of skills lawyers have as like the T-shaped lawyer. There have been some other models of this that have come along as well. Matter of fact, my colleague Allison Carroll's been working on something called the delta-shaped lawyer, which is another nice way to think about this. But the whole point being is that it used to be sufficient to have deep legal expertise, right? So that you could think about that as the vertical part of the T, right? The trunk of the T extending down. And if we were just really good as lawyers and knew a lot of substantive law, that was enough. That was enough to be a good lawyer. But now more and more clients are saying, especially sophisticated clients, well, sure, fine. You know torts, or you know contract law, you know international arbitration. That's fine. But I want other skills. There are other skills that go into being really good at delivering legal services. Just even take the international arbitration example. How do you know how to use data? Can you use data to help predict outcomes, or how long it's going to take to get to an outcome? Things like that. Do you have project management skills? Do you understand how to use technology? Do you understand the business of law or legal operations, right? The other kind of tasks that happen adjacent to different, to the provision of legal services. And these skill sets can be different. It depends on what that person is doing. For some people, the data analytics part might be really important. For other people, it might be project management is what's most important. Just getting a handle on, yeah, there might be a lot of fire drills in the kind of work that you do, but how do you figure out how to have standard practices and checklists so that you can make it easier to manage those projects, use process improvement, and then project management in connection with that. So process, I mentioned, and what we're seeing now is much more disaggregation of legal tasks. And sometimes when I talk about this, people will say to me, lawyers will say to me like, oh, well, sure, I understand basic things like non-disclosure agreements or wills, or simple landlord-tenant litigation. But what I do is special, right? Now, I practiced law for 10 years, right? And I did things that I thought were special and other people couldn't do, or maybe couldn't be, there wasn't maybe a checklist for doing it. But I think if we look at a lot of the things we do, we find that there are a lot of components of the work. Even the most sophisticated work, we can disaggregate it. We can break it down in discrete tasks and processes. And then we can find out that there are ways that we can standardize those tasks and come up with best practices so that we get the best possible result each time we do that task. The other thing we start to realize is that not everything we do is the practice of law. And so there's opportunities to get paralegals involved. There's opportunities to get people who are not lawyers at all involved in helping solve some of the things we're doing. And of course, part of that is that our clients are doing more and more of this, particularly in corporate legal departments, where they're disaggregating things and they're saying, what can we do in-house? And maybe it's with lawyers, they're hiring lawyers to come in-house and do that, but they're also looking for opportunities to send it to legal process outsourcers, law companies, and other individuals inside of the company who are not lawyers at all. So they're making these determinations about who does the work. Are we going to make it internally, or are we going to buy it from someone externally? And more we're seeing that it's not just lawyers and law firms who compete for getting that work when it's when the corporate legal department looks for outside lawyers. So we're seeing the development of a legal supply chain. It's not just legal tech companies, it's law companies, it's legal process outsourcing, it's large information providers who are providing services. We're seeing the maturation of the legal industry supply chain. Just one example here of inside of a law firm creating process maps. Seyfarth Shaw has been applying Lean Six Sigma now for around a decade, I think. And they have, last I heard, they had something like nearly 1,000, a little more than 1,000 of these process maps. And so you think if you do commercial litigation, and think about how valuable this would be for training new attorneys, but also in ensuring that even senior attorneys use the best resources that are available. So you come up with a standardized process and you say, well, how does the matter act usually work? And let's break it down so that we can capture data about these different tasks. So now you improve the gathering of your data and the entry of time. Let's give people tools. You can see off the bottom of each of these steps in the process are template documents and other information, resources that will help the person do the work. And I think that these can be also really helpful for senior attorneys as well in doing their work. One of the things I'll point out at this point is that frequently people talk about the changes in legal services delivery, that it's just going to impact junior lawyers. But think about it, if we could improve our processes and give resources like this to junior lawyers, we can help them practice at a much higher level right from the beginning. And so, on one hand, I think that that means that we're going to be shifting some of the work from senior people down to junior attorneys. So there's lots of opportunities for those junior attorneys. And then we need to be thinking about what are the senior attorneys going to be doing to really add value then on case files, when we kind of can go to this model of being able to automate and augment things and shift the work to the right people in the business model. It can create a lot of opportunities if we're proactive and think about how to pursue those opportunities, how to prepare for those opportunities. So I mentioned Lean Six Sigma. A lot of people also use lean thinking. Toyota Production System is great. The Toyota Way, a book by Jeffrey Liker, is a great book for learning about leadership and management and coaching in organizations. I've got something here in the upper right called the Improvement Kata. That's by Mike Rother, and he's written a series of books about coaching and tackling problems based on his observations on the way work is done at Toyota. There's a lot really to learn from that can also be applied directly to law practice to help us improve practice. I mentioned project management. A common approach being used for project management in law firms is agile project management, which is commonly used for software development, but it's a much more flexible sort of project management rather than just rigid waterfall project management is what an older style project management is called, where you may have a better idea all the things are going to happen downstream, for example, when you're building a business. But when you're taking on a legal matter, especially a litigation matter, for example, it might be less certain what's going to happen. And agile is all about being set up in a way to put a team together and help it function at a very high level, but also adapt to the changing requirements for the project. And then you may have heard about design thinking as well. Design thinking, it's all about being human-centered, really putting yourself in the shoes of your customers, of your clients, thinking about the other stakeholders, and thinking about, what's the real problem to be solved, brainstorming, things like that. So it's a nice framework for attacking some of these problems. These are different tools that apply for different things, but these all kind of fall into this bucket of process and how process is changing legal services delivery. So data, and I like to put a separate bucket for data because I think we're not thinking hard enough about how we can use data in the legal industry. And many of you have probably seen maybe like Lex Machina or some of the tools at Thomson Reuters or LexisNexis or Bloomberg, some of these other companies have. And so that's a start. I mean, that's data that's out there about cases and about transactions and things like that. But each of us as lawyers could also be gathering data. And just think about gathering data about every case that you handle. If it's litigation, like how long did it take for there to be a decision? How much time did it take to get to discovery? Things like that. There's so many different ways that we could be just counting and keeping track of things and gathering data to help give our clients an advantage, to help set the stage for automating things, for using more advanced forms of data analytics. And I also think that there is sometimes too much discussion about, oh, well, data is a new oil and there's lots of data in legal. Yes, but a lot of it is unstructured. And also because we do not have quality standards and we don't tend to be evidence-based, I worry that a lot of that data is not really going to be helpful, right? And everyone's probably heard of this idea of garbage in, garbage out. And if we're using data from this period of time where we're not as disciplined as we ought to be about thinking about what are the things we do and what really adds value in different transactions, then I worry that a lot of the data we already have is actually not all that valuable. And that what we really need to do is change the way we think about data and start capturing and gathering better data. And that's why it's so important that, I mean, every organization needs a data plan, even if you're an individual solo lawyer, and thinking about how you can gather data to measure your effectiveness, your profitability, data about all the different things that you do and what your most important goals are. So they're huge unexplored opportunities in that whole space. And then the last thing I'll talk about before we talk about law schools a little bit is legal technology, because even there, I think we tend to focus on robot lawyers and artificial. Here's someone, if you can mute, please.
Uh,
Okay, so on legal technology, just thinking about, yeah, it's not just about artificial intelligence. I would strongly encourage everyone to think about learning about AI, demystifying that. You know, what is it and what's driving this? And sometimes it's explained in a way that's opaque. But I think that, you know, there are more and more resources out there to learn what is it when people are talking about different tools that comprise the suite of tools that people would call artificial intelligence. But even beyond that, just thinking about what are the other kind of like basic and intermediate technologies that we can use in legal services delivery? So things like just understanding how to use Microsoft Word, Excel, PDFs, metadata, right? Using these different tools, knowing how to use these different tools. And, you know, sometimes people say like, oh, I know how to use Word, it's pretty basic, but then you'll see them draft a 20-page contract or a 50 or 100-page contract, and they don't know how to use auto numbering. They don't know how to use tools that can automatically update references within the document, right? And those are not just efficiency problems. They are efficiency problems, but they're also quality problems. And so when we don't use these tools the best way that they can be used, we're at risk of malpractice, right? We're at risk of making errors as lawyers that we should not be permitted to make, right? So we need to learn how to use these basic technologies. But then also just thinking about intermediate technologies, document automation, building basic expert systems, things like that. And then advanced technologies, right? And we're seeing more and more applications of machine learning, natural language processing for e-discovery and litigation, for due diligence in transactions, for reviewing contracts, things like that, and also for automated drafting of documents, automated drafting of litigation documents, automated drafting of contracts, things like that. So we're going to continue to see advancement in that space as well. So one last thing I wanted to kind of just say about technology, Daniel Beneke at Baker McKenzie wrote an article that I thought was really interesting as far as thinking about, right, if we want to really think about what we provide that's valuable to clients, one way you might frame it is to think that as lawyers, we sell four things: information, labor, prediction, and judgment. And of course, now information, it's easier and easier for our clients to get information. They can go to Google and find a lot of information. There are some areas where we provide labor and work that needs to get done that the clients are willing to pay for. But I think we mix up these two buckets at the end here frequently, the difference between prediction and judgment. And I think a lot of times we assume, and I was a litigator, so I tend to think of this as a litigator, and I think that, oh, well, it's judgment when I predict how much a case is worth. This case should settle for $100,000. This case should settle for $500,000. And I think we have to ask ourselves, is that actually judgment or is that just prediction? And if it's prediction, who's going to be better at that? One individual lawyer, or is a machine that has thousands of cases going to be able to make better predictions? And right, I think we ought to be able to build models and systems that can make better predictions because they can hold many examples. We can take a lot of other information into account. We can also think about how to build ensembles of humans and machines. We can have multiple humans involved in helping make predictions. So we need to be more disciplined and scientific about thinking about how to better make those predictions. And I think many organizations are thinking about how to go that direction. And so once we properly differentiate between what is prediction and when is judgment. Now, once you have that data and you know the predictions, then you can work with the client and figure out really how to exercise judgment. Should we settle now? What does it mean for the finances of the company to settle now, or potential other lawsuits that may come out, right? You can find other ways in which the lawyer applies judgment, but let's not confuse the tasks of prediction and judgment, because machines are very good at prediction. So let's start learning to differentiate between prediction, even in drafting contracts, for example. If you look at it, a lot of that is a prediction problem, figuring out which version of a clause needs to be in the contract, right? And those are things that machines are good at. So understanding these things and what it is we actually do as lawyers that to add value can really help inform thinking about what skills do we need to develop, what new products and services do we need to be developing to sell to clients. All right, so I'm going to just take a few minutes here to talk about the Northwestern Law and Technology Initiative. And so this has been the culmination of a few things that have been going on here at Northwestern. The former dean, Dan Rodriguez, was doing a lot of work in this space, and he actually hired me to come here for the visit. And then I was hired full time by the current dean, Kimberly Uracco. I've been working closely with her and Jim Spetta and Dan Rodriguez here at Northwestern, as well as people in the computer science department. Chris Hammond, I'm working closely with him. I teach a class with him. The chair of the computer science department, Samir Kuller, and the dean, Julio Tino. So there's a lot of support for the Law and Technology Initiative now here at Northwestern. And so what we're really doing here is thinking about, mostly what I just talked about was using technology to improve legal services delivery. Another side of that is thinking about the law that applies to computational technologies. What is the law of artificial intelligence and autonomous vehicles and many of these things that we see are emerging? And to me, those two things are actually much more closely related than the way we tend to talk about them. We usually talk about the law as being something separate, distinct from the delivery of services. And I think we need to think about these things more holistically, which is what we're really aiming to do in the different classes and in this initiative at Northwestern. And so there are a lot of different logos I could have put up on this screen that are kind of part of the Law and Technology Initiative. Part of it is Computer Science Plus X. It's an initiative across campus to work with many different disciplines, and this one in particular is CS, Computer Science Plus Law. We also have a Master of Science in Artificial Intelligence program at Northwestern, and that is a program where we bring in mostly STEM students, so professionals from other careers who want to get 1 year of training in law. We've got a legal clinic that we work with closely. We do some legal technology project, an entrepreneurship program that we have in the law school. I also teach in the Master of Science in Artificial Intelligence program. That's part of my joint appointment in engineering school. And we have many of those students who who learn about the law of technology. I teach a class called Law and the Governance of Artificial Intelligence. And we also have them working on capstone projects. Some of them are capstone projects in the law. And then we also have a relationship with the American Bar Association Center for Innovation. Dan Rodriguez is the chair of their board. So these are just a few examples, and then our Buffett Institute for Global Affairs. So it's really a broad initiative. And we have academic conferences that we've done at Northwestern around this, and we're going to continue to work on having some additional academic conferences. Matter of fact, we've got one on February 11th with the Journal of International Business Law on February 11th, that is, yeah. And then February 26th, we're having CS professors and law faculty. We have an event from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock on the 26th of February, where we're going to get together and talk about the research we're doing and where there are the opportunities to do more interdisciplinary research in this space. So some of the courses we're teaching, Innovation Lab, and that's a class where we have Chris Hammond and I teach it. Chris is a well-known computer science AI expert around the world. He's spoken at O'Reilly many times. He does a lot of work in this space. He has a very well-known company here that he was one of the founders of called Narrative Science. So he's well-respected in the industry. In that class, we bring together these law students, JDs and LLMs, and Master of Science in Law and Computer Science students. We put them into teams, and they work on projects, legal services delivery projects, and I'll talk about that more in just a second. I also teach a class, AI and Legal Reasoning, that is really focused on demystifying artificial intelligence, providing examples to the students. The students do some projects, building basic expert systems. They also have the flexibility to do more advanced machine learning projects, which some of the students did this last fall when I taught the class. But it's the whole point of it is to train the law students to think about how they would use artificial intelligence if they were in a big law firm or in other ways in practicing. So another class is Law of AI and Robotics. Teach that in the law school. Teaching another class called Assessing AI and Computational Technologies, which is more of an interdisciplinary class. And we talk about technologies outside of the legal industry as well. Just thinking if you're a lawyer, if you're another legal professional, or if you're a business person, how can you be part of a team that is developing products that use advanced technology? And kind of this goes to this proactive approach I talked about before. How do you contribute as part of that team to ensure that you build products, platforms, and systems that comply with the law by design and default from the beginning. And then in the computer science school, I'm teaching this class, Law and the Governance of AI, exposing computer science students to the law of technology, current regulation that's there, and talking with them about how might we regulate in this space, and just kind of like trying to get a sense for where that is all going. This is just a picture of the innovation lab. Last year we had 34 students. We've got nearly 40 in the class this year, working on different projects. I'm hoping to release more information about the projects here pretty soon. But these were the projects that we did last spring. Thomson Reuters sponsored this, which was great. We worked with Actuate Law on a project, telemedicine compliance. So building an expert system that would be facing, like, think if you're a lawyer in a hospital and you have a doctor that wants to engage in telemedicine, setting up, creating an expert system where that lawyer in the legal department at the hospital can go in and put in information about where the doctor is, where the patient is, and then figure out what they need to do to comply with applicable law if they're going to engage in telemedicine. We had a project with Reed Smith looking at legal research, and it was about capturing knowledge across databases. So if some firms use Lexis and Westlaw, for example, how can you capture data so that when someone is using Lexis and then another attorney goes and does similar research in Westlaw, that attorney can learn from the research that the other attorney had done in that other platform. We worked with our Bloom Legal Clinic in the Northwestern Law School on an immigration project, so helping people know their rights, and they built an online platform to learn about that with little quizzes, so that if you're the attorney representing, it might be a child, and that's where it would mostly be focused, then you could have them learn about this, but there was an assessment also, so you could have some comfort that the child actually learned about what their rights are. And then they also had an interesting part of this that was just a card with your rights on it and a QR code to take you to the website. So not everything is a technology solution. Some things are better solved with something else, like this card. Then we had two projects with Mayor Brown. One of them was assessing AI liability for financial services. So thinking about how to create a tool if you're in financial services industry that would give you information, help you understand which rules and regulations require compliance, and walk you through the process of being sure to comply with that. And then the other Mayor Brown was a contract terms review. So helping with the review of terms and conditions to particular contracts, spotting those issues. They started out, the student team did, using regular expressions to spot different terms. And then they started pushing it towards thinking about how they could use natural language processing as well. And that's a nice example of where many of these systems you find that natural language processing, so actually labeling data and having the system do some of the work for you, that the best systems are then augmented with regular expressions, right? Like kind of control F on steroids, people sometimes call that. But that was an interesting project. And then we did a court data exploration tool, like building an interface that could help lawyers, but also people who are not lawyers, to learn about what's going on in court systems and platforms. So we had a demo night where we presented all these. These were working products that these students built, right? It was not just a design jam where they created slides and talked about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this? No, they were actually building stuff, and every team had something really interesting to demonstrate at this presentation night, demo night. So I'll just wrap up here and tell you just a couple more things about the Law and Technology Initiative. And we've been doing monthly meetings. We had over 120 people who showed up to our first monthly meeting, a lot of people from big law firms and corporate legal departments, and computer scientists and legal technologists. So we've been doing a variety of events like that. We just did an event with Chris Hammond around artificial intelligence and thinking about, he did a training. This was a training seminar we did for 3/4 of a day on a Friday. And that was great to have a world-leading computer scientist leading training in artificial intelligence and thinking about how to apply it to law. That's a rare opportunity to get that kind of training, and we didn't charge anything for that. It was sponsored by Clifford Chance, so that was great. We're continuing to do additional events like that. And we recently just got a grant from the National Science Foundation. So a team of researchers here, an interdisciplinary team. This is across a few different departments on campus, including computer science and law, where they're building an interface to help analyze court records, right? Thinking about there will be more and more open access to court records. How do you create tools that can help people actually interpret the information as there and understand what is actually going on in the court? So I'm really excited about that project. And so I'm just going to come back around to this idea of, in the legal industry, setting bigger goals. And I think that too often the discussion about law and technology is lawyers who are worried about their own job and their own livelihood. And I understand, of course, it's threatening, it's worrisome, but I think the best way to get past that is to realize, why did we come to the law? Why do we want to be involved in the law, whether we're a lawyer or another professional doing work in the legal industry? And it's to serve people, to help improve the world, to improve society. There are huge opportunities to do that. And I think we should really be thinking about how do we automate things that we do now and add greater value. And the lawyers who have that mindset are really going to thrive in this new world, right? The ones who are really thinking about innovating and pushing the envelope and really thinking about their customers and their clients, not protecting themselves, but giving their customers and clients what's best. Those are the lawyers who are going to do best. So I'd be happy to take some questions now. And again, I'm happy to have the opportunity to speak with you today. And I'm really looking forward to being in Mexico City the week after next on January 30th. Howdy, Tom.
Yes, January 30, we're going to be on Nitan. So guys, just to make this a little bit more organized. So if you have a question, it will be easier for us if you can put it on the chat and in the meantime, Dan. So there's this thing that a lot of partners in big law firms have asked me, like all this information is great. There's a lot of what are you guys are doing at Northwestern, and as I've told you like a lot of times, I'm so jealous that it didn't happen when I was there. But like, how would you recommend a law firm where all the lawyers are already graduated from law school to start learning about this kind of new skills like project management, data analysis? What would be your first recommendation?
Yeah, well, I think that coming to conferences like we're going to do on January 30th to put in a change, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There are like this law and technology initiative at Northwestern. We're providing opportunities for people to get together and talk about what works and how to improve legal services delivery inside of law firms, legal departments, in legal aid organizations as well. So that's a part of it. But there are more and more tools available online to learn about this. People should check out Coursera, for example, or edX. I mean, there's ways to get training for free online through these massive online courses. So I'd really encourage people to check that out. And and then there's more and more writing about this as well. And there's like Thomson Reuters Legal Executive Institute that writes about some of the best practices happening in this area. I have a blog and I write about it and I tweet about it. You really should be on Twitter if you want to learn about this. And I know sometimes people think, oh, Twitter, it's just a bunch of gossip and Donald Trump. Why would I want to be on Twitter, right? Well, there's more than politics and other stuff on Twitter. There's actually a pretty robust conversation, and there are a lot of people who are leaders in legal technology talking about and sharing information about innovation and technology. So there are a lot of resources available to people, I think. And actually, one thing I'll encourage you to do, if someone's actually really interested in this space, and you should be, right? And the other thing, we don't get trained frequently as lawyers, like in how to have a business plan or how to set goals for ourselves to achieve really big goals, right? And I wrote a post on my blog, and we can share this after this session, Pepe,
sure,
about creating a career plan. And there's a great book called The Startup of You. There's tools like the Lean Canvas, and it forces you just to really think about, what do my clients need from me? Why do my clients pay me money to solve their problem? What do they expect? What do they really need? And that's the kind of work I think you need to do to really think about, well, what do my clients need? And then what should I be learning? I mean, everyone should be learning about process improvement and project management. leadership, stronger communication, management generally. So those are no-brainers. And then there are more and more opportunities to learn about data analytics and technology as well. I think if you don't have those other skills, and those can really become, those are just so helpful in every aspect of life for planning. So there's a post that I wrote about that, about creating a career plan. And I cite some resources there that can be really helpful, including, like I said, the Startup of You and the Lean Canvas, which forces you to really think about your clients and customers and what do they need from you.
That's great. That's great. So yeah, we can also share your blog. We can send you an emails to all the guys that registered to the webinar. And so guys, if you have any other question to Dan, feel free.
The sites for training. So Coursera, COURSERA I think it's .org, but if you put in Coursera, and particularly if you want to learn about artificial intelligence, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at Andrew Ng has a course called Artificial Intelligence for Everyone, AI for Everyone. And it doesn't get into the weeds on math. It's a high level understanding. It's really good. It's a great place to go to learn about that technology. And there's also some very good stuff there on lean thinking, Lean Six Sigma, agile project management. There are a lot of interesting courses there that you can learn a lot. edX, edx.org is another good platform. Now, all of these platforms are free. You can pay some money and then you can get a certificate that you can put on your LinkedIn profile or something if you want to do that. Most people don't do that, but some people, it's advantageous for them to do that. But I think the training is really world-class. It's really great training. Someone asked a question about blockchain and will it be a disruptive technology for lawyers? I mean, I think it's still very early days. And there was a lot of hype a couple of years ago, even a year ago, about blockchain. And now that's kind of gone through that cycle. I guess what I'll say is that the general premise makes sense, right? And so smart contracts, the ideas about could we write contracts so that they're machine readable, for example, right? Why, if you're a big company and you have lots of different contracts about payment and things like that, why would it be written in free form text, right? The idea that you could write something that it would be easy for a machine to actually interpret and read the contract. And there are plenty of people who are working on that, including organizations like the International Association of Commercial Contract Management. So there's, there are a lot of people who are pushing to make that happen. Whether it'll look exactly like blockchain that's going to disrupt in this space, I'd ask you to just think about the same. We got to think about the problem, not just the technology. So when you think about artificial intelligence, when you think about data analytics, when you think about blockchain, why are people hyping these technologies? What problem are they trying to solve? And if we think about it, like what problem is blockchain trying to solve? A lot of different problems, but one of the particular problems here is that standardization of contracts. Could you write a contract in a way that is more like computer code and machine readable? Could you write contracts that self-execute? And those are big problems to be solved. And my bet is that, yes, we will see technologies that are going to really change the way we think of contracts and enter in the contracts. Now, how much they're going to use blockchain or not use blockchain, I don't know. I mean, blockchain might only be used in certain use cases, but the general thinking in that area, we should be looking at that because there's some really important problems to be solved. So there's a question here then, what would I say to someone who asks, why do I have to look for a lawyer if I can do a contract in a tech platform? Well, I think that's a question we have to figure out how to do a better job of answering as lawyers. And again, I think we should empower some people to say, well, you don't need to. I'm going to create a technology tool that walks through, asks you questions about what you're doing, and 80% of the time, I can do it just through the technology. And maybe it's something that's free, or maybe it's something people pay $100 for, right? And it's a service. I think all of us as consumers, we've dealt with things, right? If I said, hey, if I was an airline and I said, you know what, you cannot book a plane ticket online anymore, you have to go to a travel agent and pay them $100 every time to do that. Now, some of us maybe wish we still had some travel agents that could help us, right? And maybe there's a value proposition, but for the most part, we say, no, I'll do it myself. I can better figure out what the flights are and how to make that purchase, right? So I think we have to ask the same questions in the legal space. Why should someone have to come into our office for a basic low-level contract? Can we create, now I think there's a big difference between just fillable forms on the internet, right? That's not what I'm talking about. The majority of just fillable forms on the internet, people don't know if that's right for them. But could you build a technology tool that actually adds value and make sure that the person gets what they need? And there are some anecdotes I've heard among plenty of attorneys who have started to just give away things like that and say, here it is, here are the tools. And you know what? People call them and people still want to talk to them. They still want to come talk to the lawyer. They still want to make sure that everything's okay and they want that extra certainty. So it's really about thinking what's best for the customers, not what's best for the lawyer. And if you do what's best for the customers, then we'll find additional ways to add value, whether it's having that one-on-one discussion so we can learn more about what they're doing and give them the help reassure them that they really have what they need, for example. Right. So if we're really focused on the customers and explaining to them, this is the other reason why too, I think we need better metrics for quality and value. So we can demonstrate to clients the value of actually having a lawyer involved and the additional value that is added when lawyers actually get involved. But we have a lot of work to do to be able to gather that data and then demonstrate to clients and customers that it makes sense to have the lawyers involved. We'll add a lot of value.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think Rebecca was thinking about platforms such as LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer, where you can just get a username and then just have like a bunch of contract templates. But you're right, like people, like there's a contract template, but it's like pretty standard. But usually the negotiation with your with the other party has like a lot of tweaks that need to be adapted to the contract. So even if you have like a very standard form of I don't know, any kind of agreement, you still need the lawyer's work to not just at the drafting, but also the negotiation, which is like one of the most important things when you're drafting a contract.
Yeah, I think there are areas where it would make sense that someone should be able to use an online tool if it's well designed to help them solve the problem. But there are all kinds of areas where we should be able to demonstrate that as lawyers, we can add additional value by being involved, whether it's helping with negotiation or helping with additional revisions or so on. But
right.
I hear sometimes people complain that, oh, I saw someone who went to LegalZoom and then they got a bad contract. And it's like, well, I've also seen people who went to a lawyer and got a bad contract, right? And so that's why I think we need to really think about what is appropriate to use online technology tools and where are the areas where we as lawyers can really provide the best services and can really help people. And that's the way every other part of the economy works. When people can see that they're getting value, then they're happy to pay professionals and pay for products and services if you can show them that you're adding value to their life.
Exactly, and I also think that that happens a lot also to corporate like legal departments, that they're spending so much money on outside lawyers, and they're already implementing software such as contract lifecycle managers, where they can draft contracts based on their standard terms and conditions, and that is saving them money, because I've seen that a lot on the consulting firm, that one of the biggest goals for corporate departments is just to lower the fees paid for outside lawyers. So like all this kind of technology is also helping companies to reduce the legal fees, and that's another important point on why law firms need to adapt to new technologies.
Yeah. I think another thing that I would add to that is that not every legal department is just pushing for the lowest cost possible. But exactly. if we as lawyers go to the legal department and the client can't tell any difference between us and 5 other law firms, then why would they do anything but pay the lowest cost provider who they thought can do a good job? And this is why, again, I think we need to better understand what do our clients value, really know their business in a way that we can describe to them how we add value. And if we have better processes, if that can help us close deals faster, help us get the contract done faster, right? What does the client really care about? Oftentimes, it's not the things that we focus on most as the lawyer, it's other things connected to that. So there are plenty of clients out there who won't just look to lower costs because they're also considering value. But we too frequently as lawyers, we don't know how to talk to our clients about the value that we actually add.
Exactly. And just billable hours.
Right. They're not too fond of paying billable hours, but if we can demonstrate them the value that they'll get if they hire us, yeah, that's where we need to go.
That's the added value. Excellent. So guys, anyone else would like to ask a question to Dan? This is the moment. Okay. Well, I guess that's pretty much it.
All right.
Okay, perfect. So very, very excited for your conference, for your speaking engagement, Dan. I'll see you here. Well, we also gonna see you in 2 weeks in the time, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it as well.
Perfect.
I look forward to seeing you in there.
Excellent. So guys, if you want to get your tickets, I'm going to just copy paste the link so you can go to the website in Eventbrite, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. January 30, the conference is going to be at 4 p.m. It's going to last around 2.5 hours. I mean, in total, and afterwards, after the conference of Dan Linna, we're also going to have like a networking cocktail, so we can all introduce yourself to Dan.
Great.
Excellent. So thanks a lot, Dan, and see you in 2 weeks.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
See ya.